Let's go, Tina.
Okay, in 3, 2, 1, and...
Hello, I'm Steve Gillmor. This is the Gillmor Gang. It's Friday, except in the Far East. I'm not sure about that, actually. We've got Robert Scoble coming in from London on 1.
Yay!
Nice
and you are breaking up a little bit, so hopefully this connection stays pretty good.
Okay, well, I'll do what I can, which is...
Okay, cool.
You know, I can hear you. You got an actually pretty good picture. Excellent. Okay. Joining us from Dan Farber, where are you?
That's due to the beer I have, by the way.
Okay, well, we're going to try and keep you talking so that the alcohol content doesn't get too high.
Save it for the show.
Dan Farber, where are you?
Today I'm at an undisclosed location in Marin County, California.
Excellent. So Dan Farber's here. Also from Harvard is Doc Searls. Welcome, Doc.
Hey, guys. Good to see you. So I want to see it. Do we all have facial hair now? Now that Scoble has gotten all old and bear-like. Very good.
Mine's gone.
I want to hear it rubbing the microphone.
Taschek used to have facial hair, but he shaved it off.
Well, you can turn his head upside down and it'll look okay.
No, I don't think that would help that much.
Okay, so have we had enough of the witty banter about age?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so what's going on? Let's start with you, Doc Searls. What's going on?
You talking to me? It's
I'm
very
talking to
broken
you.
up. I see. I'm in the middle one of those.
You're in the center square, the Paul Lynde seat.
Lots of. This is Tahrir Square at Harvard. Oh my gosh, just a lot of fun stuff. I'm just working with a lot of developers on new and fun things, and but tonight, actually, right after this, I'm going to go see 2 astronauts and Douglas Trumbull talk about the overview effect, which is what I like to shoot from airplanes, except they do it from space. And they're giving a talk here. Douglas Trumbull is the guy who did special effects for 2001 and for Blade Runner and Close Encounters. And
Silent Running was his first.
Silent Running was a big one for him. And
That's a great movie.
And he did Brainstorm. That was the one where famous for Natalie Wood having croaked in the middle of it after they had most of her in the can before she was in the box, as it were. And but anyway, I'm looking forward to meeting him. So that's just going to be exciting stuff. I got Steve on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, timely as well. we're at nothing but up to the minute or second. This is real time, baby. Robert Scoble, what's going on over the pond? Where are you? You're in London?
Yeah, I'm in London. We were at Le Web, and tonight we're in London hanging out with family and with Rachel Clark, who's a marketer here, and having a lot of fun.
And
went to the National Gallery. So what's happening here? Le Web was all about the Internet of Things, and so they had lots of speeches by people like Tony Fidel, who runs Nest thermostats, and the guys who run the Fitbit, which I got one of the new Fitbits in my pocket, so I can see how many steps I did. Let's see how many steps. I did 7,000 steps.
Very good.
Yeah. Yeah, not too bad.
Were you walking on the plane?
In London, that's called pub crawl, and I brought my pub.
Okay.
For the Gillmor Gang.
And back to the beer.
Looks like a urine sample, though. How can we tell? Make him drink it.
It either is or will be.
It will be in about
no
4
comment.
hours. Yeah. Recycling.
Okay, Dan Farber.
I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Dan Farber, what do you see as interesting from your lead-lined room in an undisclosed location?
What's interesting is we're nearing the end of the year. And at some point, hopefully, there might be a few hours in which people decide that they're not going to tweet or Facebook anything, and we can all take a rest.
You think that's going to happen?
No, but it might slow down enough that people don't have to become as obsessed about what's flowing through that river, including me.
Tina predicted that this is going to turn into one of these end of the year shows, but I'm desperately trying to wait for Leo to do it first. So if we can avoid that, that would be great. John Taschek, what do you find interesting? You rattled off about 3 or 4 things on a earlier phone call, and I begged you to wait until the show. So do you remember any of them, or have they gone away?
What were we talking about then?
I don't know. There were some interesting stories that you saw that were out there.
Let's see. There was the Netflix story, but I don't think that's what was interesting. Oh, it was Microsoft maybe selling its its last ad unit, I think. And I thought that I don't want to make a prediction because everybody else makes predictions that are probably far more accurate than mine. But to me, if they're getting rid of that revenue source, it looks like they may be ready to make a larger acquisition because they'll need it. They can't be just a hardware-software company. They have to have something that injects some lifeblood into that company now. And so I thought maybe they'd make a fairly large acquisition this year because they're spinning off a bunch of other stuff too.
All right, Robert Scoble, what do you think Microsoft might be in the market for?
Business model? I don't know. They're doing. I don't want to repeat what we talked about the last 4 weeks. Just
why stop now?
Microsoft has $15 billion businesses, and it's doing just fine on the business side, but they're really struggling to get market share on mobile and on tablets, and that's becoming more and more apparent every day that there's a report from the sales teams.
Dan Farber, do you think that Microsoft is in a tailspin? I mean, we've been basically saying that for about 8 years, or at least I have, but do you think the handwriting is finally on the wall?
Well, I think you could legitimately say that Microsoft is in a tailspin, but it's an extremely slow spin, and they still have a huge market. But one can see with kind of mobile and social, Google search, Facebook, and other things that that they probably need to make some kind of big move with all that cash they have so they can maintain their relevancy beyond the Xbox and a few other things as a hedge against Windows 8 on the phone and on the tablet and on the PC not really getting where it needs to be for Microsoft to feel like it's been successful.
Doc, do you agree?
Yeah, I think I can't understand what the other guys are saying, but I think Microsoft's been shooting themselves at the feet for years, and they finally got themselves in the head, and they're going down. I mean, right now it's so sad and bad. They've got some great tech. They've got a lot of great people. They've got a lot of good stuff they've been working on. But everybody I've talked to that has anything to do with the company talks about the bureaucratic obstructions to doing everything, and there's just I don't see any. I think, they're gonna decline in an asymptotic level. I mean, so right now they're kind of going like this, and they're gonna flatten out at a certain point because they're gonna have Exchange. They're gonna have a few things that, people are always gonna use. But Windows 8 is a disaster, and I think the Surface is probably going to be a disaster. And everybody I've spoken to who is actually even a Windows developer literally hates, loathes, can't stand Windows 8. I got 2 magazines. Actually, I have them here. I have. So I look at the New Yorker. Here's the New Yorker. No, here's Vanity Fair, right? You expect to see Kate Moss on the cover of Vanity Fair. Instead, there's this thing. I think, what is that? I don't know what that is. It looks like Flipboard, sort of, but it's worse. Or in the New Yorker. The New Yorker always has clever art in the front. Here's the New Yorker. I ripped these off. But underneath it is this, and what it says is a sample of the New Yorker. The new New Yorker experience on the Windows 8 desktop. Well, I don't want that on the New Yorker. I don't want that on a desktop. There's nothing that makes me want that at all. And they think that's going to convince me of something, or they're convince whatever deal they did with Condé Nast. It's sad and bad and weird and but they're so hidebound and slow that I don't know what they. I mean, I think they have assets. They have. I mean, right now, mobile search, I think, is a great one. I think they can draw with the help of what's left of Nokia and especially Navtech. They can go up against Google on that stuff, and they can work a lot closer to retail than Google does in a lot of different ways. I think there's just a lot of possibilities there, but I'm not sure they have. Even if they have the imagination, I don't see any sign that they're going to do anything with it. I was talking to a Windows developer the other day who has an awesome idea and is loyal, just loves working with the company and loves their stuff, and sounds like Scoble 6 years ago. You know, I mean, when he was hawking Vista, and is just despairing because Windows 8 is a dog. You know, so anyway, I just go on about it, but it's kind of, I don't see any hope.
Robert, what was the sentiment like about Microsoft at the web?
I didn't see any Windows stuff here. That's not true. I saw a few Windows phones, but everybody I sat with at dinner was using Android or iPhone. It's the same story I've been telling people for 2 years. That this world is a two-party system right now, and the third and fourth parties don't really matter. And people argue with me here and there, but I look around. I look around, sitting in the speaker room. And I check what we're using. I checked what people are using on the flight. I saw all iPads. I did not see a single Surface machine. I saw a few Kindles again. No Surface. No Windows 8 yet on the planes. Apple's in charge of this world for the high end, for the hardcore users. By the way, did you see the stats that came out in the last couple weeks that the usage and the purchase power of an iPhone user is still outweighing 6 Android users? So 1 to 6, because Android is outselling Apple by 6 to 1. But the Apple users are using more web, using more apps, and buying more things than 6 Android users, and that's still a story for people who are building businesses. Where am I going? There's, we should talk about some of the common themes that have been coming up this week. Fred Wilson and a whole bunch of others have started arguing out, should a business be mobile first, or should it still build for the web? And there's been some pretty good arguments that the web is more important. I think they're nuts, and they're nuts for a couple reasons. One, everybody in London is walking around like this, and when you go out to big,
you're getting a little choppy, right?
People are walking around like this with this thing in their hand, something that looks like this in their hand, whether it's an Android thing or a Nokia thing or whatever. They're
not like Robert Headroom
with their laptop. So anybody says to not build for mobile first, I think is absolutely nuts. And then in the next 36 months, there's going to be 1 billion new people joining the internet, thanks to very low-cost Android phones in India and China and Africa and Brazil and other places. And they've never owned a laptop, and they're never going to own a laptop or a PC or a desktop machine. So if you want to reach those people, you got to be mobile first. So I don't get the full argument that we're having on TechMeme right now, whether we should be building a mobile first or a web company. I think they're absolutely nuts to not build a mobile first company. Now that said, it's a tough market. I have 200 apps here, and I don't have much mental energy for taking on more mobile apps. I mean, my home screen is packed with 220, 230 apps right now. I got another 10 at the web. I have this new app called AppsFire, actually, that helps me find new apps. But I can't, I just am, I've reached my saturation point, and I'm a very heavy user of this stuff. But if you're building a business, it is a market. It's tough to get people to adopt this stuff and keep using your app.
Okay, Robert,
if it was easy to build a business, then everybody would be building Instagram, right?
Robert, you're a little choppy, or a lot choppy, depending upon the second. So I'm going to switch to John Taschek. And what's your take?
On Windows and mobile?
Yeah.
Well, I think I said it as clearly as I could a couple weeks ago, is that there was an enterprise aspect to Microsoft that they they kind of have an installed base there. I mean, they definitely do. And they, in order to get the Ultrabooks and Surface, the Surface Pro and the Surface RT into the enterprises, they had to have some of the technology shored up, and had some of the resellers shored up. And instead, they went after the consumers because they've read all the stuff about the consumerization of IT. But that's missing a crucial aspect there, where IT is still in charge of a lot of stuff, including the operating systems that are used on the desktop. And because they didn't do that, they kind of missed a window of opportunity there. And meanwhile, there's a whole bunch of bring your own devices coming in, and I think that there's as the standardized operating system rollout for the desktop is it's still just getting to be Windows 7, and they're not going to do 8 at all for the most part. They'll have to wait the next version because it's such a dramatic shift. And interface, like Doc says, is one part of that. I don't know. I think those Lumia, they look like nice devices. It's just really hard to compete in a really competitive world, and especially if you're coming from so far behind and from a development and a look and feel that's so different than the normal model. It's kind of like I don't know, Borland and Turbo Pascal kind of changing all the icons in as you develop Windows. No one liked it, or it's like people trying to reinvent the Windows screen to make it more appealing, following the MS Bob model, and it just didn't work. There's a kind of a look and feel that you have to have, and Apple set that tone. And so if it doesn't look like Apple or function like Apple, then it doesn't really work in that tablet environment, just from a psychological reason.
So we seem to be faced with this, endless discussion as we watch Microsoft sort of dribble away the potential of actually saving themselves. Dan Farber seems to think that it's going to take a while or forever for them to actually lose all their money.
It's like GM, or it's like any of these large companies that have this large established basis. It takes a long time. A lot of people when there's two competing examples here. One's digital, DEC, and everyone thought the DEC would never go away. But the fact is, DEC was kind of sandwiched in between microcomputers and mainframes, and being a mini computer, and therefore they had to go in one of two directions, and they chose to try to compromise and do both, which was a failure, which is kind of what Microsoft's doing right now. The other is IBM, and IBM had the PC business, and then all of a sudden, if you recall, its stock stabilized at something like 150, and then it started going down, and everyone thought it was irrelevant. But it's not irrelevant. It was always incredibly relevant as a company. And it's just that it didn't matter as much. But now they've built, and they've become, they bought a services organization. They've done a lot of stuff around services, and they have their Smarter Planet initiatives. They're much better off now than they used to be. And Microsoft has that choice. Are they going to go this IBM route and change what they're doing? Change the whole DNA of the company to be like that, or are they going to try to do a little bit of everything like Digital did?
Doc?
I'm missing so much of what everybody else is saying, but am I audible?
I can hear you.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. I just wanted to tweet this. If Bill Gates were still alive, he would never let this happen.
Well, that's
wait
not
a minute.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not nice.
I guess what I'm trying to get a
it's
sense
horrible.
of.
I mean, it's really bad. It's really bad.
I'm trying to get a sense of from the group here, about is there anything interesting about technology anymore, or are we just basically in the throes of being consumers for Apple's and maybe Android's offerings? I mean, is there something that other than Google Glasses, Robert? Is there anything that we, on a daily basis, that we are looking for when we go online, that other than friends and family on Facebook and the usual tweets? Go ahead, Robert.
I say it still is nuts. I mean, in the last week, on both my iPad and my iPhone and my Nexus 7, I've seen dozens of apps upgrade, and there's a lot of innovation that's happening in the app market. SoundCloud's got a dramatic improvement. TripIt just got an improvement, and on and on and on. That's where the fun stuff is happening, and entrepreneurs keep coming up to me at the web and other shows and show me fun apps. That's what gets me wound up, and that's why I can't buy a Windows phone. I keep trying it, and I keep trying Android, and the apps simply are not as good as on iOS platform. And every time I'm in a green room at a speaker conference, I say, "Hey man, are your apps as good on Android as they are on iOS?" And the answer almost always is, "No, they're not. Our best programmers are on iOS because the better users are on iOS, the better the monetization is on iOS. So we're going to put our best programmers on iOS, and everybody else is going to get shit. Android's going to get better than everybody else." A lot of companies aren't even building for anything that's not Android or iOS. So, I keep looking at what gets updated. Last night alone on my iPhone, 12 apps got upgraded. And that's like Christmas every Thursday.
You're breaking up again, Robert.
The dozens of apps get upgraded.
I'm going to call you back and see whether I can get a better signal from you. Dan Farber, while I do that, could you answer the question that I'm asking, which is, what about technology is remotely interesting enough that we spend, people like me spend all of our waking hours trying to find out interesting information and mostly are failing?
Well, I think you're being a little dismissive. If you really think about it, how old is Facebook? How old is Twitter? How old is Android, Google, etc.? I mean, all of these things are, less than 10 years old mostly, and so we're coming, into a time where we're having these new platforms established at in this case Microsoft's expense, and these new platforms are continuing to evolve. And as Robert was saying, there's huge development communities around them who are continuing to innovate. The cadence of launches is getting a lot faster. Consumers have so many more choices right now. So in that sense, it's great. I think the question people are asking is, well, Apple had the iPhone, the iPad. What's the next big thing? Is it ITV or something like that, or is it when everybody in this country can get actually a decent bandwidth connection? So there's tremendous amount of innovation continuing on these new platforms. And you talk about Microsoft. Ballmer used to say, it's all about developers, and that's continued to be true today, which is who has the developers. And the target that a Facebook and an Apple, a Google have, or Samsung or HTC or Huawei, is the fact that probably over the next half a dozen years, there could be 2 or 3 more billion people upgrading to smartphones. So that's really a case for the mobile first, which is many people, that'll be their first computer. And if they want other kinds of computers with bigger footprints, like a laptop or something, they would probably go with the same operating system or same platform that they're using on their mobile device, if that's possible. So lots of stuff going on. Microsoft is not exactly dead, but it's going to be a real challenge for Windows 8 to shake off its adolescence and kind of compete when these other guys have something.
Well, I agree with everything you said. I think that the thing with Microsoft is that we're so kind of ambivalent these days about their possibilities, that we don't realize that they're really decomposing extremely rapidly, even more than you might think. I mean, if you take a look at what's happening with Netflix, which I'm sure I will get complaints from Taschek and others about changing the subject from the obvious tech stories to what I consider to be the fundamental tech story, which is Netflix and Spotify.
I have a segue for you there.
Oh, excellent. Go ahead, and then I'll get back to my point.
Okay. Well, I was using, and somebody on the feed may call this a user error, but I think the user error is actually the choice of operating system I chose to use. I was using Windows 7, and of course, to run Netflix on Windows 7, you need to install Silverlight. Well, I saw this kind of hip commercial from Microsoft saying IE10 was really cool, and so I tried the beta of IE10, which required yet another install of Silverlight, but it didn't work. It just didn't work. I tried everything, went through all the documentations, went through the Silverlight. You have to run a command prompt with the SFC to figure out if you're missing any components, of course, which is great. I love doing that stuff. I loved it in 1990, and I'm still doing it now. But running the command prompts. However, it still doesn't work. It never did, and now I'm stuck. I mean, IE10 is actually embedded into the operating system now. And I'm not sure unless I use their versioning to get back out of it. Anyway, there's a segue between Windows and Netflix.
Okay, so what's happening with Netflix is that they just bought a relationship with Disney, which includes, what was the company, Pixar, and some other product. And what was interesting is they stole it away from Stars and the other major pay networks. So we've got this streaming network that everybody says is not going to make it, that they're not going to be successful, that they are spending more. They say this about Spotify as well, that they're spending more in licensing and rights than they could possibly make. And what's happening is that the entire industry, the television industry, is completely flipping around this new media. There was an interview with Tim Cook last night on NBC Rock Center, whatever that's, their news magazine show. And I went and downloaded the app. I haven't looked at it yet, but at 10 o'clock I could watch it, or at 7 o'clock Eastern I could watch it, well, whatever. I could watch it on the network, but there were two other shows that I wanted to record, so I couldn't watch it. So I just went and downloaded the app, and the whole show is there, the whole interview is there, and all of the references on the various social networks to this show point at NBC, but they don't point at the app yet. So I guess what I'm saying is that Spotify is now becoming a discovery network. It's starting to create a social community around what people are listening to. That's starting to drive the charts. We're starting to see record sales being not cannibalized by Spotify, but actually added to by Spotify. Some record that just came out sold 600,000 albums and was the second largest streaming property ever on the network. So, this whole windowing system in Hollywood is now being subverted. Netflix is now becoming a major studio and is getting into production. These are the kinds of things that are really happening. And all the network shows, they're now starting to rapidly count all of the streaming and second sourcing, tablet sales, DVRs, all that kind of stuff that a year ago the networks were saying, well, we can't count this stuff and it's not going to, the advertisers aren't going to want it. Now the advertisers, not only do they want it, they're moving into the social networks to get the kind of engagement that they can deliver as value to the advertising networks. Now, I know Doc doesn't like advertising. He's yawning as we speak.
No, I'm fine with advertising.
But it seems to me that there's this enormous disruption going on while I keep sitting here waiting for something exciting to happen. Something exciting to happen is happening over on the television side. So does anybody sense that might be important, or am I just hopelessly outdated in terms of my perspective on this? Anybody talk?
I think it's important, and I think it's interesting, and I think we're seeing unevenly a passing of a number of torches. Microsoft's an obvious one right now. Google and Apple both appear to be strong, but I think that there's certain, I wouldn't say either one of them has jumped the shark yet, nor Facebook, but there's a sense of lassitude there. There's a sense of stagnation. I mean, the only cool thing Apple's come out with really since Steve died is the Mini, which probably should have come out 3 years ago. The iPhone 5 is a stretched 4, with 4S, which is a slightly fancy 4. I mean, if you've got a 4, you don't really need a 5 unless you need Siri and some of this other shit. I think that there's, and Google and Facebook both have enormous potential to get more involved in the marketplace than they are, but they both want to be in the advertising business, which I think there's nothing wrong with being in the advertising business. It's just that we're conflating two kinds of advertising. There's Madison Avenue advertising, there's brand advertising. And I'm getting this from ComScore, by the way. There's brand advertising, and then there's direct marketing type advertising. It's a completely different thing. Direct marketing is personal. It wants to track you and give you all kinds of stuff personally. And brand advertising simply wants to let you know they've got the money to advertise and that you really ought to drink their beer. And by conflating those, I think we've confused a couple of things. I think there's a problem for both of them in the marketplace right now, but they're both making money and they're both supplying an enormous amount of money to the ecosystem. I mean, look at the what happened with the Dodgers. I want to say the Brooklyn Dodgers because I grew up with them, but I mean the Los Angeles Dodgers just sold TV rights for $6 billion. That's a colossal amount of money, and that's for advertising. There's going to be a big amount of money spent on that. People aren't going to stop watching sports. But I think there is a limit to how far we can go, or anybody can go with personalization when it's not exactly wanted on the user side. But that I've been haranguing on that for several years. It's not interesting to me anymore. But what is interesting to me, and where I think cool stuff is going to happen, is here. I was trying to find it on the iPad. There it is. It's called the personal. Oh, it wants to flip itself. The personal cloud. Okay, it's a personal operating system where you have the operating system. Your device doesn't have the operating system. Your device still has an operating system, but you've got one of your own. You've got your own APIs. You've got your own way you've got your own platform that you can put apps on. And you can start programming the relationships between your operating system and all of the apps that you already own and all of the APIs in the world that give you maps and data for various things, where you start having much more control not only over your life, but the interaction with the Internet of Things. I was pleased to hear from Robert that the Internet of Things is a big deal at Le Web. But I want to point to Kinetics. They're really very far under the radar. That's Kynetx. But the easier thing to remember is Phil Windley, Windley, former CIO of Utah, runs Kinetics. He's written an open source language called KRL for Kinetic Rules Language. He's conceived of the personal cloud and the personal operating system, and he's got code. And it's really interesting stuff. And I'm very excited about it. I think there's all kinds of... It's a new erector set that we can play with where we're not inside anybody's silo, but we can work with all the silos that are there. We don't have to leave Facebook to go to the next big thing or leave Twitter. We can use all of them. But we have our own platform that lives in the cloud, but it's our cloud. And it's not somebody else's cloud. And it's got our data in it, and we selectively expose it. And we can program against it. We can put logic around it. And we can do our own programming, but we don't have to do it with lines of code in the usual way, but just simple structs that look like graphics that we can plug together and say a lot of if-then. You know, if I'm in Cambridge and Steve happens to also be there, let's give him a call using this other app over here. And we haven't burdened anybody with a silo with writing some new application software around that. but rather just simply program this stuff ourselves. I think that's the next step, and I think it's a heck of a lot more interesting than what any big company by itself is up to, even though we need those big companies to keep doing what they're doing.
Okay, so Robert Scoble, you were mentioned in that tirade.
Yeah, a bit. I like Phil Windley, and can you hear me this time?
Yeah,
Are we
now it's
getting
much
a
better.
good signal?
Robert, some advice is hold very still, because as soon as you move, it makes demands on the bandwidth. So don't move your lips when you're talking.
Okay, it's a better connection.
I will hold as still as possible.
Hey, look, it's Philip Seymour Hoffman.
I'll go until somebody stops me. But the problem here is I love what Phil's doing, but I'm using iPhones, iPads, and other devices that Kinect doesn't run on. At least that I understand, it doesn't run on the iPad, does it?
Oh yeah, well, it doesn't run anywhere. It runs in its own cloud. But here's the thing, the cloud doesn't run on an iPad. Everything that's called the cloud doesn't run on an iPad. It is back end. It's your own back end. And here's another important thing. Don't look for it to do things right now. It's still early. This is still prototype stuff, but it's interesting as prototype stuff. I mean, to me, this is Xerox PARC with a mouse at this stage, and with the graphical UI, it's not a finished product, and it does nothing to say, don't use an iPad or anything like that. I mean, Phil's got iPads and iPhones and Androids and other things laying around doing all kinds of fun stuff. So it's not or logic, it's and logic, but it's still early. But Steve asked, what am I excited about? And that's one of those things.
Yeah. I'm excited about context, and that means sensors, big data, wearable computing, social networks, and mapping all mixed together to build highly personalized products. I was just at Oakley last week and saw their ski goggles with a wearable computer or a wearable screen, a heads-up display that shows you where on the mountain you are when you're skiing and who you're skiing with, and that's leading us toward the Google Glass or other wearable computers. I have a new Fitbit that they just gave me at the web, and that's a wearable computer that's showing me data on its little screen about what I'm doing in life, how many steps I've taken, or other things. I interviewed the CEO of Basis, which is making a watch with 4 sensors on it that studies your heart rate, your perspiration, and other things, and it's going to show you some data and spit that over to your Android or your iOS device. That's what this stuff is exciting me more than anything on the web lately.
Where does the data go, Robert? If you want to pull all that together, if you want to pull together your heart rate and your diet and your Fitbits, and the rest of it.
Of course, it goes into a data silo of its own, which sucks. I mean, we have on my iPhone, I have 224 data silos that don't talk to each other, and that world does suck. I mean, Foursquare doesn't talk to Food Spotting, doesn't talk to TripIt, doesn't talk to Instagram, barely talks to Facebook, and on and on. And so, this is a major problem. The Basis Watch goes into its own app that shows you all sorts of stuff about your life, whether you're, about to die or not,
John Taschek, we're hearing all about this, these open source projects, and we're also hearing from Scoble about all these big players, that don't talk to each other. Is there any chance that any of this is going to change?
It is. I definitely think it will. There's going to be, a context bus. I think it will start in the enterprise because it's more necessary there for companies to survive when they have their data tied together. And so they'll take the APIs, they'll extract them. They'll force the vendors that they work with to have some kind of open set of APIs where they can work together. And then in any enterprise, in any company, and then the vendors will be there to kind of put that data together to integrate it. At first, it will probably be point-to-point integration. Then there'll be multi-point integration, and Robert's fingers is pointing at me. So there's going to be at least one point from Robert Scoble integration. Go ahead, Robert.
I just interviewed the CMO of Salesforce, one of the guys you guys work with, Mike Lazaro, and he's, Buddy Media that Salesforce bought is studying 400 million data sources and integrating it in this way. But even he admits that this is a pretty crude integration at this point. I just had dinner with the CEO of Cred, who is suing Twitter to get access to the Firehose feed, or keep access to the Firehose feed. And the behind the scenes is fascinating. For instance, Twitter says, well, go to Gnip, another guy I interviewed on stage at LeWeb, and the videos are up, by the way, on the LeWeb YouTube site. But Gnip has 400 million tweets a day going through its systems, but they're not allowed to deliver them to Cred, to People Browser. So Twitter is really playing a lot of games with its ecosystem here, and it's not clear to anybody who is a developer based on Twitter how to get access to this social data that is really the integration point right now between all of these data silos, because a lot of these data silos are pushing stuff to Twitter, right? My Nike Fuel Band wristband is tweeting every time I get a certain level of points. It goes to Twitter. My Instagram is going to Twitter, and they're having arguments with Twitter about what exactly should go to Twitter. Should it be a photo or just a link or whatnot? But they go to Twitter, and most of the other things, whether it be Waze or driving information or Runkeep or when I'm running, all that stuff goes to Twitter. So Twitter is really the integration point between these data silos
But
right
it's
now.
not. It's
and
not
Twitter's
for the reasons that
being a dickhead with all these developers.
Dan Farber, Twitter is, basically they're walling off their third-party developers from being able to do exactly what Robert and Doc and John say we need to do. Is there anything new about Twitter being, shutting down Track? And, this has been going on since the first day that people realized what Twitter was.
No, this is not surprising at all. I was at Twitter last night for their PR holiday party, and they're just doing what they need to do as a company. You know how I like to talk about this as colonization. So right now Twitter is doing its colonization, and we all know what happened when people from Europe came to North America. The Indians get killed off. So right now Twitter's basically killing off the Indians so it can take over the land.
So Taschek is right, and we just wait for us to do. These consumer silos are just going to keep fighting with each other until somebody creates a business app.
Well, you can even go further and talk about how the internet now. There's a meeting going on in Dubai right now where people are trying to take over the internet. Try to bring it under someone or some organization's thumb. You have just the issue like governments have no clue what to do about the internet.
Do you think they're going to be successful at taking over?
I hope not.
Doc?
No, it's like taking over the ocean. It's not going to work. We'll find workarounds. I mean, there's a lot of legitimate concern around what the ITU is doing, and a lot of really great writing about it. Dan, your brother, and Cory Doctorow and others have said some really eloquent and correct things. But I think this is what we're talking about, because I can't tell what the hell anybody's saying. So, but I hope I'm right about this. This is the ITU scare.
Yes.
But it's not going to happen. There's just the internet is too useful as it stands. Trying to push the internet genie back in the telco bottle so you can have tariffs at the borders and charge people for calls and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of the model that they want to go on. There's almost a complete misunderstanding of the internet on the part of those guys, and at least the ones that are the Soviet Union, the Russia and China and these other guys, and the repressive states. People who don't like personal or, for that matter, business freedom, are busy. Trying to imagine the world that's safe for telcos again, because they were able to run that thing because there was no real hard line between a telco and a government, and that's what they want. It's the International Telecommunications Union, and that's of course they want things to be on the telco model. That's one reason they've done a rhetorical snatch by calling it broadband instead of internet. Every chance they get, they talk about broadband instead of internet, because they don't want to use the I word. They want it to go away, and it's not going to go away. It can't go away. It's too useful, and nobody owns it. You can't really shut. It's like shutting down a language or some other thing like that. It's not going to work.
What do you think about these? Is this something you named, Scoble? The WhatsApp app, or is it WhatsApp up? I don't know. What is it called? It's an instant messaging thing that's growing like wildfire. Is what it is.
Yeah, it's one of these apps that I just got. WhatsApp. The WhatsApp app.
Yeah, but I mean, what's interesting about it is that they're surfing on top of iMessage, which has moved something like 40% of SMS off of SMS and onto the computer, basically onto these mobile devices. In the case of iMessage, it's Apple's format, but this WhatsApp thing is growing very, very rapidly as people realize that they just don't need to be spending $20 a month to the carriers for these unlimited SMS messages.
Yeah, that's true, and I don't know. I don't focus on text because I'm just not that interested in it. I've had full-on data plans for so long that it's just not interesting to me.
But what about the normal people that
you talk to my son, who's the high school crowd is still much more into texting than the old people.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the disruption. I'm trying to loop back to what's going on with Netflix and Spotify, etc. The idea that if we move from what Doc calls broadband model to the we're just going to create an app for it, and we're going to develop our own little community, and then that community is going to start getting some scale and some leverage, and then it's just basically going to people flip over to it. I mean, my kids use texting and Skype.
It's more like
constantly.
The Uber cab disruption. That's much more interesting to me. Getting me a cab in London or Paris is much more interesting. There are three companies going at it here. Uber and Halo and Taxi something. There's a new one that I forget about. But, that's more interesting to me.
It's the same. It's the same thing. It's the idea. I mean, aren't these cab companies? Uber Cab, isn't it getting shut down in New York by the cab union?
There's a fight going on for these companies are trying to take on the and regulations. Airbnb is trying to get shut down in New York, and that's more interesting to me than a texting company that's just trying to take a dollar away from the carrier. Yeah, that's great, wonderful. My kid cares about that. It doesn't affect me.
Okay. Well, I guess using it as an analogy isn't working either. So, does anybody else have anything to say?
I think you were talking about WhatsApp, which is a chat service that's on all the mobile platforms, and I think it has somewhere north of 100 million users and does probably 1.5 billion messages a day. And I think the story was that maybe Facebook was taking a look at that as another way to kind of capture a way to get into some of the countries where it's not as strong. In the same way that they just announced that their messenger service is going to be available in India, China, South Africa, I can't remember all the countries, and it doesn't require Facebook.
Well, the other thing that was interesting this week was Instagram pulling their support for off of Twitter after Twitter pulled their support off of Instagram. Isn't that about what happened?
No, they pulled support for Twitter cards, so the pictures get truncated.
Right. So what was the purpose of doing that, other than to stick a thumb in Twitter's eye?
Purpose, is part of the colonization, which is Facebook and Instagram don't want people to go to Twitter to look at the pictures. They want them to look at the pictures on Instagram.
Mm-hmm. And they're not. I mean, Facebook and Instagram have huge numbers of customers.
Sure.
So what are they worried about?
They just want to keep them inside their walls and monetize them.
John Taschek, do you agree?
It seemed to me that there was some kind of fight that was brewing up around that Instagram did something, and then that Twitter. I don't know enough. I don't care. I think generally, Twitter is closing itself off more quickly than it should, and that's can be problematic for the consumers, right? If you're talking about land grab, great. If you're talking about like what the consumer benefit is, the users of Twitter, they're going to find fewer and fewer benefits if it keeps on getting closed too fast, and the consumers can't build the things that they want or use things in the way they want to, and that's going to be a problem. But I agree with Dan. It's what they're doing. They're parsing off what it's like. They're taking over. They're one country for you, one country for you. It's just it's just internet space and time. That's their land grab.
Da in the chat room says that Twitter's ever higher walls sucks, and then he says the internet will treat Twitter's walls as damage. Doc Searls, do you agree with that? They're going to treat it as damage?
Yeah, they probably will. Well, I mean, just every successful platform has always done its best to invite as many developers as possible, on the assumption that the developers are going to know more to do with the platform than they themselves do. I haven't heard of anybody who's happy with what Twitter's doing, and I don't think it's a good thing. And I don't think there's any speed at which you can close something down. I mean, they should be dealing in a more inclusive way with everybody. But I think if an ecosystem is owned by somebody, it's not really an ecosystem. It's a biosphere, and it's inherently vulnerable. And that's a problem. I mean, I think Twitter is one of the reasons Twitter worked, and one of the reasons its API worked is that it works with, it plugged into a lot of other things, and Facebook's does too. I mean, they've certainly done an awful lot with Facebook Connect, and they deserve credit for that, and for having the infrastructure to hold up through all of that. But you don't want unhappy developers. I mean, nobody who wants to have a platform wants unhappy developers if they're sane. So I don't know what's going on with that. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't even know what the hell they closed off. I just know that they're unhappy people.
Yeah, there are a lot of unhappy people. But the history.
You know what's going on is
Go
they
ahead.
care more about the Pope joining Twitter than they care about anything else. I mean, the Pope is going to bring how many hundreds of millions of people to Twitter?
I can understand it, Robert.
The Pope.
And so
Pope.
Oh, the
that's
Pope
who
is
they're
going to bring him in?
fixing.
I doubt
There's
it.
2,000 employees at Twitter doing deals like that, and that's all they care about. They don't give a shit about users. They don't give a shit about developers, and they don't give a shit about anybody except for these celebrities who are going to bring users in.
I submit you the smoking corpse of AOL to I mean there's the road is littered with people who had dumb ideas like that. I mean, you don't screw the users, you don't screw your developers.
Yeah.
Dan,
I mean,
go
even if
ahead.
you do these big deals, it's bad business. It's just bad business.
Dan, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying there's a little bit of over-rotation. I think that the issue for Twitter now is it's growing up very fast. If you look at the people who are at Twitter right now, a huge percentage of them are ex-Google, which is to say that they've already been through the system and grown up in that corporation, which is all about how do you sustain the company, make money, beat your competitors. At the same time, try to do some good things and develop some cool stuff. but it's no longer developers, from the ground up saying, yeah, we want to do this cool thing and invite everybody in and make it ubiquitous, or doing something like what Dalton Caldwell's trying to do, which is do an alternative to Twitter where, it's totally open and
please,
pay your fee. But this is just what happens when Twitter gets corporate.
I mean, it's like, is Windows 8 going to be successful? No. Is the Surface going to be successful? No. Is app.net going to be successful? No. I mean, what are we talking about here? Every time Twitter pulls the plug on something, their valuation goes up. They become more successful.
Yeah.
There are all these angry developers out there, but I mean...
We're angry, but we're locked in the trunk.
Oh, give me a break, locked in the trunk.
You cannot leave Twitter. I can't leave Twitter. I don't like the company. I can't leave Twitter. There's no way I can leave Twitter. I have 302,000 people listening to me. So that means my business, my career is locked up in Twitter. And my inbound is locked up in Twitter. But the people I want to listen to are on Twitter, and until they leave, I can't leave Twitter. I'm locked in the trunk, and so are the developers. So is everybody who hates them. We are locked in the trunk, and therefore their strategy should be not care about us and go after the Pope.
Well,
they
then
got the Pope this
you
week.
need to take your 300,000.
Got 200,000 followers in 24 hours, which is far more than I got in 4 years.
You're just jealous.
Absolutely,
what you should do,
the business strategy is right on Twitter. If I was running Twitter, I'd be saying "screw you" to all the developers, all the geeks. I would be going after the Pope because there's a billion Catholic people out there who are going to bring real growth into Twitter for a long time.
I think you should start a revolution and take your 300,000 people and go someplace else.
They won't go because the other people haven't gone.
Then I guess you're stuck at the trunk.
I had dinner with Dalton this week at the web, who runs app.net. It's not ready for us. It's simply not ready. It doesn't have a feature that makes us cool, wants us to move over. I mean, compare it to Google Plus even. Google Plus just turned on communities today, which is sort of cool. But is that going to get anybody to leave Twitter or leave
Can
Facebook?
you explain?
Hell no.
Can somebody, John Taschek, can you explain this communities thing? Because I've been invited to a bunch of things, and I still can't tell.
No, I
who
can't
else
explain
has
it.
been invited.
I wasn't invited, but it sounds like Robert knows about it.
Well, I mean,
yeah, communities is how do I put it?
Well, circles are still brain dead, right?
No, community is like a circle that's open. That anybody can post to. It's like a chat room almost.
So you can tell.
And it's gonna. By the way, it's gonna have the same problems as a chat room. It's gonna. Chat rooms. I wrote a whole post a couple of years ago called "The Chat Room Problem," where chat rooms always start interesting. I mean, if you take the 5 of us on this show and have a chat room, it's gonna be interesting, right? Then you add 6, 7, 8, 10 people, and it starts getting a little less interesting. Not more. It does not get more interesting with more people. And then if you keep going there, you get up to 1,000 people. It starts getting noisy, and we start going, man, this is not fun anymore. And then all of a sudden the spammers start coming in because there's a lot of people there, and the newbies come in and they don't understand the rules or they don't know what we were talking about last year, and they increase the noise. This is called the chat room problem. As the number of people go up, the utility goes down. And this is something that the Google Plus people are going to discover because they have not learned from the internet history. Compare this to something like Quora. Quora is not yet mainstream, but at least it's getting better as more people join it because there's a voting mechanism, there's defenses against the spam problem, there's defenses against newbies and people who are not as authoritative or as credible. They get posted on the page lower. That gets better as more people join it. The Google Plus communities is going to get worse, and it's unfortunate. But I started one just for fun. But you're gonna see that community thing not go very far.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to wind this one up. Let's go around, and I would like an assessment from each of you as to whether or not Windows 8 is going to be successful, or not, whether app.net is going to be successful or not, and whether Twitter is going to be successful by continuing to be the bad boy of the internet industry. I'm going to start with Dan Farber.
App.net, not likely. Windows 8, no, but perhaps Windows 9. And what was the last one? Twitter's behavior. Twitter does what Twitter needs to do to compete in the market space, to become the platform of choice.
Doc Searls.
I missed what the first one was. You're asking about Windows 8 and Twitter, and what was the first one?
Windows 8, app.net, and Twitter's behavior. Is it going to be successful? Are any of them are going to be successful or not?
I don't know about the .NET thing. Windows 8, I think, is a failure now. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be forced to use it because they're going to buy the machines and it comes with it, and they're not going to be able to ratchet back very easily. But I agree with Dan that Windows 9 may be better, and they're probably in a big hurry to make that happen. But maybe not. They're a pretty slow-moving company, so who knows? As for Twitter, obviously, they're, I think the defense of Twitter is, the one that Dan gave and then Robert gave to some degree. But there is a cost to screwing over customers and screwing over users, and that's and they're going to pay it sooner or later, I think.
So you think the cost will outweigh the benefits that they've achieved by creating a business model, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think the users don't care about their business model, and I think that the developers probably do to a lesser degree, but they care more about what, depending on the infrastructure that that Twitter provides, and if they go subtracting some of that infrastructure, which apparently they did, that's not only no fun, but it's aversive, and it sends the developers somewhere else. So, what good is that? I think it's all these guys act like they're trees that grow to the sky. They don't. They're in a forest, and they need to be part of the forest, and they can't own it all. And I guess that's what they're trying to do. I don't know what the hell they're trying to do, honestly, but to me, they're a handy thing that we've had for a while, and having the Pope on it, I don't give a shit. If that's cool for the Pope, I guess. But to me, they're a handy messaging thing, and at some point, something else will come along that's better, and Robert will take his 200,000 followers, and I'll take my 20,000, and you'll take whatever you've got, and we'll go somewhere else.
All right. So, Robert, those three.
I think you're a little nuts to call the funeral on Windows 8. It depends where you put the goalposts. I mean, I think even if it's a massive failure, it's still going to sell 100 million copies. I wish I had a failure that would sell 100 million copies. If it's a successful thing, it's going to sell 400, 500 million copies. So, that's a pretty nice product, even if it's a massive failure.
Well, I'm lumping it in with Surface. So you think that the Touch initiative,
and it was gonna struggle at that price point. The price is too high on the Surface. Coming in with a product that has no apps, no momentum at $500 is ridiculous. I thought it was ridiculous at the time. It should have been $200, $250, $300 to compete with the low end of the market, and come in and say, hey, we're really serious about this, we're going to get going. And that would have drawn in the developers. I think a lot of developers, I talked to Mike McHugh at Flipboard and many developers this week at LeWeb, and they're like, we're going to have a wait-and-see attitude. We're going to see how many of these things they sell. They're selling fewer and fewer market share of Windows Phone. This Surface seems like it's selling, I don't know, less than 2 million copies, which is a total failure in the marketplace compared to, Apple when they're selling tens of millions a quarter. But we'll see.
All right, so
Bomber's spending a shitload on advertising. I'm not here in London and in Paris. There's huge billboards that say that are advertising Surface and Windows 8. Microsoft is spending, I think, $1.5 billion on advertising. They're really trying to get a market going. the jury's out. I am not buying one. Most of my friends are not buying one. I don't see yet ones, in the first class or business class or economy class of the planes that I've flown lately. And until I start seeing them, I don't have any confidence that the average normal person's taking this app. So that covers the Windows stuff. The other things
App.net.
Is Twitter going to succeed? Twitter is still on a growth tear. They just got the Pope this week. They're going to have other wins. Their business does not depend on developers. Google Plus does not depend on developers. Facebook is really tough to deal with for developers. So these things are, they're very successful on their own without too many developers on board. And I don't see that changing short term. Hopefully somebody changes the game there. App.net is just not there as a serious effort yet. They do have enough money to go for a while, and it'll be interesting to see what Dalton does that's different and cool or new compared to Twitter or Facebook. But right now it looks like a Twitter clone without anybody on it. We're seeing Google Plus spend billions of dollars to get something going on, and while they're bragging about their numbers, I think their numbers are jiggered a little bit. I don't see the usage there.
Okay, John Taschek.
Translation, no.
Okay,
I'm more excited by this Fitbit than anything we talked about on the show lately.
John Taschek.
Well, I kind of agree with Robert. I think Windows 8 is going to be a failure because if you look at the operating system and how it affects shareholder value, I don't think it's going to add value to the shareholders anytime soon. I think their stock's going to be the same, more or less. That said, it's going to be way more successful than like BOS and things like that. It's going to be it's on every PC installed. It's really hard to buy a Windows 7 machine now because they've kind of locked up, the Lenovo's, HPs, and Dells and things like that. But to work against Microsoft on this is fewer people are buying PCs and more people are buying the other devices, and other devices are kind of eating that up, and they're eating it up at the expense of Windows 8 and Surface and everything else, really, in its path. That's where the growth is. So even if Windows does sell more, Windows 8 sells more than Windows 7, it may not be enough to make it more relevant. But I don't think people care. I really don't. Microsoft advertising is probably the wrong way of going at airports. It's probably not the right way to do this because that whole engagement philosophy of why people use things. The way it started with Microsoft was very different from that. They didn't put up gigantic posters everywhere and advertise everywhere. That was a little bit later. What they did was they went into the people who were influential and started getting them interested, and created a developer model and the developer enthusiasm around that product. So with Visual Basic, so that's very different from what they're doing now.
Okay, what about App.net?
App.net. No, I don't think so. I think if you look at the number of people who are on Google Plus, and the amount of open APIs that Google generally has, it might be an interesting business that might be profitable. Is if you could use that as infrastructure or plumbing, and build a social network on top of that, and instead of trying to compete with it in a developer-centric way, I think that App.net does.
I think that's an interesting insight. And the Twitter question? Twitter. Are they going to be successful regardless of their behavior?
So far, it hasn't bothered me, except that I'm one of the last people who use My Yahoo, and as just a general portal into your financial portfolio and a couple things, and it's been cut off from there now. I'm like, God, they're cutting it off from My Yahoo. Why would they do that? So it's impacted me that way. It's impacted certainly all the clients who use it, and it's impacted everybody but Hootsuite, I think. is no longer has access to it the way they want to. But I just can't see myself a year from now being forced to go to a Twitter website or a Twitter app to do Twitter. I want it to be more of a seamless thing that's integrated with other things, more along the Facebook model. However, I do like this information flow they have, and I don't think it's replaceable by anything at this time. So they're making a bet. I think it's early, but it's probably not going to hurt them, and it's not going to hurt them as much as what happened with MySpace, for example.
Okay, so quickly, Windows 8 and the attempt to try and stop the hemorrhaging around mobile is going to be a huge failure. It already is a substantial failure. There's not enough room in the marketplace for a third player right now, and that's what they're bucking for. And I think they're going to get there just because of the brute force of having Windows machines out there in such numbers that they will have a presence. But in terms of the impact on their very small presence in the mobile environment, I think that they're tying a millstone around their neck by trying to create an operating system that works equally well in both places, when one of those places, where their strength is diminishing rapidly. App.net, forget it. You go ahead, Robert. You're out of here? Okay.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Everybody
See
has
you
to
later,
go.
man. Thanks.
And I think Twitter's going to continue to get away with doing whatever they please. I want to thank Rackspace and Rob Legess, particularly Rob, for giving the show some support that it needed in order to continue. I want to thank NewTek and their TriCaster. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor. I want to thank our guests or members of the gang today. Dan Farber, thank you very much for showing up on your extended holiday.
My pleasure.
I want to thank Robert Scoble, who's already bailed. I want to thank Doc Searls. The beginning of the show was heavy Doc Searls for those of you who are watching this.
I'm lighter than I used to be. I've lost 12 pounds. So there you go.
You look great.
Thank you.
And I want to thank John Taschek.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Get mad at Twitter because they deserve it. They're too important to be so stupid about throwing away their ecosystem. And of course, they will stop doing this, and everything will be okay again. I want to thank everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. Please continue to stay away in great numbers. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.